everybody. Hi, farm friends. Going to talk about planting out your tomatoes and your starts that many of you picked up this week. It was fun to see people. This is one of our cherry tomatoes that Nina's going to have put out in the field this week. And so yours will not look like this. This is what we call a plug, and this is a plug tray. And so when you have the roots that are surrounding and holding the plug, we call that being root knit. What you don't really want is this, which is when you see the roots start to reach the bottom of the plug and start to go in circles. So this means the plant has really had enough time in the cell tray and wants to get out into the ground. So yours shouldn't look like this if they're in 4-inch pots, but they should hold together for most of the soil. And what you'll want to do on something like this is you'll just want to loosen the bottom of the roots. It's difficult to be too rough. You don't want to pull and tear, but what I do is I get a finger in there and I loosen the roots so that you're now essentially telling the roots they don't have to keep going in a circle in the shape of the tray. They can start to send themselves downward where the nutrients are. And then when you plant it, you're going to want to plant, these are the first leaves that come up when the seed is sprouting. And in a tomato, you actually want to pull these off. These will become root nodes. And then I go one more. So on this plant, I would go here, and I'd probably even take this off. And I would plant this plant right up to here. So each of these nodes that I just pulled will become roots. So now the plant has the benefit of all the roots that had already formed in the plug tray, but it will form additional roots further up. It will strengthen, theoretically, the stem of the tomato. And you've got plenty of foliage and greenery for photosynthesis above so that the plant can, get a good start. Mm-hmm. So you'd be planting right up to here. So your tomato's going to look short and funny in the ground, but you don't want to put the soil so close to this branch that you're getting it in contact with the soil. So about where my fingers are is where I would put the soil depth. And then water it in well.
Should the soil be wet before?
The soil does not need to be wet, but the plant should be wet. So the soil you're planting into, it's nice if it's moist. It's easier for you to work it, but that's not necessary. What is important is that the start is wet before you put it in. And then once you've planted it, very important to water it in. So that's really important. And for any new plant, its biggest shock is at transplant. So that's when you don't want it to struggle for anything. So in this case, planting in a tomato, you want that tomato to have sufficient water that it's not struggling for that. And I would say it depends on your conditions, your soil, and it certainly depends on the weather. But if it's warm spring days like we're having now, giving it a good soaking in when you first water it, and then maybe 3 days later, and maybe another 3 to 4 days after that, a good soaking. Then usually as the season progresses, tomatoes like deep watering about once a week. They don't need to be watered frequently, and shallow watering encourages roots to stay at the surface. Deep watering encourages them to head downward, and the plant will be more, robust if its roots are further down.
And deep watering just means you give it a lot of water.
More water to soak through rather than just a little bit on the top and then done. And all you've really done is surface. So you're encouraging the roots to head upward for water, and you don't want them to do that. You want them to find water as they're heading down.